Dr. Dennis Rebelo, thank you so much for joining us on the Career Success Tips live show. I am so thrilled to have you here. We have known each other. I was thinking about this today that we've known each other for such a long time, easily more than a decade. But we don't really see each other that often. But every time we reconnect, it's just instant, like not a day has gone by.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's been a long time, and it's always energizing to hear what you've been up to and how you're helping others. So that's probably why I get excited to speak to you about these topics linked to career development and first career, right, and how you can support others out there in the world. So thanks for the invitation. Glad to be here.
Yeah, well, I'm thrilled to have your insights and expertise because you actually do work with college students.
I do.
Yes. And well, the question that I always ask at the beginning is, what's something that has changed in the past couple of years that you maybe a book that information is just totally outdated? What's something that you
Mhm.
observe and that you see that would be a great tip for someone who's out there in the job market?
I think it's actually connected to the book I wrote during COVID, but I will say, but I'm not going to dive into the book just yet. I would say that storytelling is a big deal, right? And your story matters. We know the flip is in that the boss, the leader, who is normally the storyteller and controlling and influencing the room, that is not the only that person's not they're not the only person, right? There's you. And so as you come into organizations, people do want to hear your story. And I say the flip is in because this changed, right? Years ago, it would you if you had the power stick, if you had the position power, if you were the expert, the owner, the person writing the checks, signing them, stamping them, or approving them, it would be you. But it's actually others. So I like this flip. So if you're not ready to tell your story, you need to get ready because there's now space for you.
Right. I love that. And one thing that came up in a prior show was that if you are working virtually and you're on a meeting and you're meeting on Zoom, that you make sure that you keep your camera on and that you do actually contribute to the conversation and thinking about what you should be contributing and what your story is. Even if it's a small part of a project, I would think to have that clarity and the skill set to be able to do that is really important.
And part of doing it well is having a plan, right? And so when when I decided to write the book Story Like You Mean It, I decided to write it so that people could have a way of organizing different key moments in their lives so that they could order them and have less stress and be understood as having value in certain moments, whether they're leading a team, they're combining teams at work, working cross functionally, or nailing the job interview, right? You want to get on the team in the first place, you need to tell a convincing story. And that doesn't mean that you're over the top in your storytelling or self-aggrandizing or overly confident, but you're confident in the right sort of way that you start to emanate a little bit of aura or uniqueness or energy. And that's something that I've seen happen more and more, that once folks dedicate themselves to understanding these key life moments that make up who you are, right? Your identity, that conveyance in spoken word becomes a critical performance that can help you not only get the job, but then be readied by other people telling your story so that when you arrive, people are like, oh, I heard about you. You learned English as a second language when you were 8 years old and you came from this country and they're like, you're the ABC person. I mean, isn't that a great way to be welcomed into an organization where they already know you and they're excited because your story is already, been sprinkled around the organization. It's a great opportunity for people.
And I think it's so crucial too, and like you said, to have, we were talking earlier about having the opportunity to reflect on what those pivotal moments are and then apply them to, or put them into context for the other person. So you're sort of creating a shared experience. Like, yes, you're talking about yourself
Mhm.
in an interview, but you know a little bit about that person and what they may be looking for. And by understanding your story, you're able to invite them on that journey.
Yeah. I mean, it really is a dialogical sport, right? It's back and forth, to and fro, right? There is a back and forth nature to story. My social media person, John, he said, "We're getting you on TikTok," and I said, "Are you kidding me?" And so I said, "All right, fine, let's roll," because I'm pretty open.
Yeah.
And we did a couple of rips, and some of the I think one of the videos hit like 9,000 views, like right out of
That's
the
awesome.
gate. And yeah, and you know, that's fine. But the reason why I think the second one also did really well, and the third and the fourth, is because I was hitting topics that had to do with performance. So there are a couple of things. That one that you said that is so critical, that you know, you have to get into self-reflection to find meaningful moments, right? And I call them in the book, I call them, you know, you get find one hero experience at the base of the triangle of life, one collaborative one when you're doing something with others, and one that's like peak, that it's like you should, the thing that you're telling the interviewer, if you didn't do this thing, it would be immoral for you to, well, to stop doing this thing. You have to do this thing, and by the way, I can do it here, right? Whatever that is, whether it's running a project, an event manager, being a marketing person, an omni-channel person, a digital analyst, you know, whatever it is that you do. And I think to myself, wow, like this is such a great opportunity for storytellers or people to be able to grab these moments through the window of self-reflection. But you still have to be able to have intention. You have to have the ability to reframe yourself, and you have to understand your audience. And that's where story shaping takes place. So you get your peak story, you know, the 3 moments that make up who you are as you're rolling in. But then there's this nuanced bit. And the only reason you can get way forward to get better at storytelling is to listen to your breath, listen to your tone, and have those moments planned. So, you know, extending on what good advisory might be for someone looking to get their first job, you know, be ready for that moment where you step onto the stage, into the batter's box, or on the other side of the chessboard, because it's those moments that of readiness up to that point that'll impact your ability to be a really confident but not overconfident communicator. And people will feel your energy. They know that your life makes sense up to this point, and therefore you're granted more value. You're given more value by your audience, and you're a bit unique. You know, you're not rolling in there, you know, explaining why digital marketing and omni-channel marketing I've always been interested in. I'm really excited to work for a company like blah 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 blah. I mean, they've heard it 1,000, 2,000 times, you know, and it makes people fall asleep. So who are you, and why should you matter to me, the interviewer, is the question you need to answer.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And to be able to tell it in the context of a story, as we know, humanity, right? Our brains are primed to listen to that. And I think one
Yeah.
problem that I have is I get a little too detailed in my stories. So, but I guess that's the preparation, right? That's the reflection and the editing piece, just as anything
Hmm.
else.
Well, you're a phenomenal writer, so you can really equate it to editing. And you
Hmm.
know, it's not the writing that matters, it's the editing, right? So
Right.
you might come up with these big moments in your life, and then you start to chop them down. I was helping somebody in Atlanta remotely, ready for a big pitch, and they were pitching themselves as a provider in a big deal, a business deal. And it was really important for the 3 people, because I was working with all 3, to narrow down their self introduction. But if they got it right, which I believe they did the last report, then the audience would be more engaged in a dialogue. So you'll notice that as storytellers, even when you're interviewing, that if you get it right, people are more interested in you. You're more interesting, and they start to slow down, and they almost come out of this automated sort of interview mode, and they start to relax. And then you know
Hmm.
that you started to open really true dialogue. You know, and the word dialogue is a cool word. It means to pass through your lips dia with meaning, logos. So
Oh,
that you
interesting.
can't, you know, yeah, you do, you know, to claim dialogue. We had a dialogue. No, you didn't. You talked at someone. But if you have the to and fro, to your point, that's how you get to an encounter, a deep experience, and then they remember. And story is different because it lights up the sensory cortex and the motor cortex. You know, it stimulates our brains. I mean, little kids know how to tell stories, and they haven't gone to executive storytelling school, right? They just know it. We just know it, and we start to
Yeah.
lose our storytelling muscle over time. So, you know, time to reclaim that. And speaking just to speak is not necessarily, and most certainly 99% of the time, is not storytelling. So when someone
Mm.
says, "Oh, I like telling a good story," chances are that's probably not a great storyteller, right? You just dive into story, and you captivate them and pull them into this, you know, sort of the Sizzlers of your life, and that's what creates this. We call it an episodic version of who you are, because that episode, just like a good Netflix or Amazon Prime, you know, flick, it actually gives you it's a different version of you in the moment. So that's why we call it episodic versions, because each episode is played differently. It doesn't change who you are. It's just as you edit it for, a fintech company, it might be different than a community development company. You might be able to talk more about
Hmm.
your collaborative moment. Yeah, right on. Yeah, good stuff. Boy, you
Interesting.
get me all excited about interviews now.
Well, yeah, I was just thinking about my interview at the Boston Globe, and I interviewed with Marty Barron, who was the editor at the time.
Mm,
And I just remember being so starstruck, right? It was right when Spotlight was coming out and
mm,
the church sex abuse scandal. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm here. I was 27 years old or whatever I was.
yeah.
And I just really had to, and everybody has seen the movie, I think, by now. So you understand his demeanor. He's like very kind of dry and calm. And I was like, oh my God. But the one thing that I had a couple questions prepared so that I wouldn't really have to talk about myself that much. And the question that I asked is, you're offering all these buyouts, so why are you hiring? Right? Which was a legitimate concern that I had because I had a job. I didn't want to leave a job if I was putting myself at risk. Again, hindsight, not a whole lot of world experience at that point, but it just got him going, and then the interview was over, and I was like, thank God. So, do you have any tips, to overcome the nerves? And I think also when you're sitting across from a pretty high powered
Yeah.
person and you're young and you don't have all the life experiences, I guess what are some tips for people who feel like they don't really
Yeah.
have that much to talk about?
So the first tip is you do have a lot to talk about, right? Just don't rush in and think you don't. So that's the first quick tip that I'll give. The second would be, with practice and rehearsal, you'll get better,
Yeah.
right? So when you go live with people, you'll see and hear and feel that, you've heard yourself say these words before. So when you hear yourself say these words, when the book came out, I did, I think, 17 interviews really quickly. And, when you hear the words that you're using again, they're like a familiar recipe, a familiar food. These are just the words that make sense. So I could keep going and going and do 20 or 30 interviews. It wouldn't matter. And you can too as an interviewer. But know your words, know the story and the meaning behind them. The filler words that connect the dots of who you are, those will just show up. Sometimes we hear people repeat the same words like, oh, I really want an opportunity or clarity or a clear like culture and it's like those are usually filler words. So if you're using a lot of filler words, don't. That my third piece of advice is don't use those. Use the words that are equating to the meaningful events in your life that led you to this point where you're applying for this job.
Hmm.
Record yourself, listen to yourself. You have to, get on the scale. You have to understand how quickly you can run a 40 or a 5K in order to get better at it. So we have to treat that deliberate practice as serious stuff. I've worked with a lot of pro sports folks from the NFL, some NBA folks who founded teams in the NBA, like the Orlando Magic, etc. I've interviewed folks for up to 8.5 hours. Hall of Fame coaches like Tony Dungy. He was on the list, not an 8.5 hour one, but certainly a long one. And don't be fooled by someone's greatness that they're not human. The more
Hmm.
people who are great, who are celebrity, who I've met, have similar patterns of events, both heroic, where they save themselves by doing something, or collaborating with others, and then leading them to this, what they believe is the next season of work or life. So everybody has similar patterns of experiences. They're distinct experiences still, they're personalized, but don't be fooled by celebrity or any of that because it doesn't really matter. And it
Hmm.
will, unless it overwhelms you, then it will really matter because then it'll change the way you approach it. The last thing I'll say about advice is when you lose your way in life, Rollo May, the great existential psychologist, said it's an ironic and unfortunate habit. When you lose your way in life, we tend to speed up. Don't speed up and pay attention to other people who do. Listen to people who are pitching themselves, whether it's at a cafe or in a movie, and check out what happens when they start to speed up. Their breathing changes. They feel like they're running away from the actual conversation. They want it to end. If you want something to last, you bathe in it, you stay in it, right? And it changes the response to the other or from the other.
Hmm.
So stay in the moment, slow down, check out your voice, listen to your voice, practice the words. The words won't be foreign to you when you hear them, and they won't trip you up.
Yeah, definitely. I think that that's really great advice and also applies to sales. When you're
Yeah,
interacting with people, in essence, an interview is you're selling yourself, right? You're selling yourself as a
yeah.
service or a product,
Hmm.
and to take the time. And I think as your anxiety builds and your nerves, to breathe, make sure that you're take a breath,
Yeah.
and if you talk too fast, people can't grasp what you're saying anyway.
No. And when we were younger, people who were quick speakers, we thought that they were smart,
Hmm.
right? But they were almost like, quickly trying to sell us that they're smart. The
Yes.
smarter people, in retrospect, are the ones who could kind of hang in silence and think about things out loud.
Hmm.
So just, I think it's important to recognize that, speeding up is running away from versus staying in. Having said that, we don't want you to be like on slow motion camera, during the
Right.
interview either. So keep the pace reasonable, make sure you're breathing, and understand that vocal fry usually isn't your friend. I'll give you that's another bit of advice. Vocal fry is that relaxation of the vocal cords, that Kardashian thing.
Yes.
I really, really, I want to work for your company. It's really good. Like that.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
guys and gals do it. Humans do it. They do it. She does it. He does it. We do it. The only thing that happens when people hear it is they feel like something isn't right. And we can even hear different broadcasters and journalists do it now. And so it's a little bit in vogue. Before, it used to be that, oh, it was too trendy, like a Valley Girl kind of thing,
Hmm.
but where it would be like, oh, I'm really glad to be here. But we want to remove all that. So if you have serious uptones, we want to cut it out. If you vocal fry and relax your voice, even if you're like, wow, I didn't even notice that before, please notice it before an interview, because sometimes it throws off the vibe, as the best way I can say it, because there's a lot of research on why it's ineffective. It's also not very good for you, because you're not committing. You're shaking your voice box. You're not really doing something good for you. So
Yeah.
the vocal cords, right? So um, I'll give folks one tool called Vocular, Vocular.
Nice.
Vocular is an app. Yeah, it's $2. You can buy it. I think it's $1.99, and you can check your vocal fry, the musical note of your
Ooh.
voice. You speak into it for 30 seconds, and it matches you with celebrities to see what celebrity you sound most like. Totally a blast. I use it in classes, and it's a big hit.
That's amazing. One of my COVID projects was to do an online training to improve my voice, and I would say it's effective, but again, it depends on context too, right? So because
Hmm.
I've done a lot of these, I feel comfortable doing it, and that's where you're saying the practice really makes a big difference. But
Hmm.
overall,
Hmm.
it's
Absolutely,
better to lower your voice than
it
than
is.
higher,
Yeah.
which
Well,
is
just think
great.
about the way as human beings we are, right? You
Yeah.
drop something, you don't go, "Oh, I dropped something." You go, "Ah!" You're like, "Ah, I dropped something." You know, uh, something bad is about to happen. Your voice goes up. So if your voice keeps going up in areas where people want, think about it. If I'm trying to hire you, I don't want like it to be like dropping a plate. But
Yeah.
if you're telling me that your voice is way up here, it's actually from an auditory standpoint signaling to me that things are a little unstable because you keep climbing up, and I might not be conscious of it. I just know that something's not necessarily matching for me.
Right.
So if you can bring your voice down to your point, what you're doing is I call it you're doing the Morgan Freeman, all right, from Shawshank
Yes.
Redemption. You're bringing yourself to this place of calm. I mean, that movie was wonderful because of him. And if he were narrating, if anyone else were narrating it but him, it would not. I contend it would not have been as effective.
Mm.
So just even in that case, if you're thinking, well, is that really true? Well, just think about it. Who would you replace Morgan Freeman with? How could somebody narrate better than him? Well,
Mm.
I don't think so. And deep voices do it all the time. John Hamm does the Mercedes-Benz commercials.
Yes.
John from Mad Men, and obviously there are hosts of others who have deep voices. My dear friend and voice coach who we use to align students with is a guy named Marshall Jones, and executives, and we were listening to his voice in a class that he and I co-built, and it was his voice was so, and he has like almost 2 million views on a poetry slam event he did on Bowery Street in New York City.
Hmm.
But his voice was so up, and then we listened to an older one where his voice was so up, and then we listened to him when he did the Four Seasons. He did a special event for Four Seasons that you can find on YouTube. It's Marshall Jones Four Seasons. His voice was much lower, and it was more calming and more settling. So nobody wants to hire somebody who makes them get a little bit nervous. So when your voice
Yes.
pops up too much, you're getting people nervous. That's the takeaway.
Yeah, and like you said, even if you don't recognize, or even if they don't recognize it, that
That's
that
right.
energy. Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's really interesting to talk about the auditory pieces, the subconscious
Mhm.
pieces, and then the practice pieces, which is really important because basically most interview questions, whether the words change, the intent of the question is pretty much the same.
Mhm.
So I could
Mhm.
ask you in about five different ways. Tell me
Mhm.
what you're good at, or tell me about a problem that you overcame, or so if you have your stories that align to what those basic questions are, it's a matter of listening to what the point of the question is, and not
Mhm.
necessarily. I guess it's a good question. Is how closely do you have to match your story to the answer?
Yeah, well, as close as you can, right? And so if you know your story at the front end, you're really shaping, the theme of your life into the job. That'll also help you determine whether or not you should even apply for the job,
Hmm.
right? So, if you're trying to get a job, a lot of people are qualified or good who can interview well, but they won't be happy when they say yes to the job that they should have said no to. So
Yes.
not only is it about nailing the job, should you even go on the interview?
Right.
And right, so that's why getting your story straight out of the gate is so critical, because you're going to blow your time and your effort, and you're blowing other people's time and effort. And if you take the job and in 3 to 6 months it's not the job for you, people will say, "Oh, fail forward." I'll say, "Well, could you have known a little bit more about it? In three or
Hmm.
4 months, I mean, anybody can last in a job. Presumably, is that as long as it's not dangerous for 6 months. So why would you take a job and only stay there for 6 months? Again, we probably flip jobs 18 to 24 months now. So I understand that that might seem like, an eternity for someone to be in a job that they don't like. I'm not even coming close to advising you should stay in a job you don't like. But just consider what you could learn about yourself if you did some self reflection beforehand, ordered up your story, and forgot about where you were applying and just thought about your narrative, and then match the narrative to where the applications could go, and then point in those directions. You could then reserve your energy and use that energy for the interview opportunities that mattered most. And I
Hmm.
think that would be a better way for you to spend your time.
Yeah. So when it comes to understanding yourself, that reflection piece, what are some tips that you have that would be easy to implement?
Yeah. Well, the quick answer is, being the kind of guy that I am, right? An author, professor, right? I could speak a little bit extra on this, so I'm gonna be really tight with it. I'll give you my best, non TikTok but close. Look at your life as having look at your life as having three chapters: 0 to 13, 13 to now, and then tomorrow to whenever. And pick a formative experience, something that's a big deal in your life, right? And from 0 to 13, think about what it is. Maybe you stood up to a bully. Maybe you thought of someone as being a good friend, and they weren't a good friend, and you had to kind of stay away from them. So you had to
Yeah.
like
I
lower
moved
your
to Germany.
communication. You moved to Germany. Okay, great
Yep.
example, right?
When I was
So you had to
11.
be at, how old are you? 11,
I
right?
was
So there you
11.
go.
Yeah.
So 11. What did you learn when you moved to Germany? Why was it hard or easy?
Both. There's no simple answer. It was life transforming. It was
Yeah.
basically coming of age very early. It felt like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but
So
an amazing experience.
yeah, amazing experience. So now, if you said, "Oh, I moved to Germany, I lived in Germany, amazing experience," and you live in the Newport area, and I would say, okay, so she probably is worldly and she hasn't really struggled much. Now, that's not really true, because moving to Germany is a struggle when you have never lived in Germany. So what
Yeah,
I would
you don't
want to
speak
do
the
is
language.
show a little bit of that struggle in the story, right? That it was a little challenging. What was challenging about moving to Germany?
Oh, I didn't speak. I did not speak German, and there were a lot of people at that time who didn't speak English, and so I would be on
Okay.
public transportation getting lost, and yeah,
Oh
like
my
it
gosh,
was a little
yeah.
crazy.
And did you have to eventually learn how to speak German, or did you figure out other ways around it?
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, I was taking classes, once I got into school, so I learned enough to be able to get around, but especially in the
Mm,
beginning, it was bumpy. And then also
yeah.
had really great friends who I'm still really great friends with all these years later, who really helped me out. Like basically it was sort of like it was like having a fixer with you, right? Like, when journalists go overseas and they have somebody, a translator, somebody who sets everything up for them, that's what those friends were like.
So that little moment, the way I would position it in an interview would be something like, when someone says, "Well, tell me about yourself." Well, how far back do you want me to go to Germany? And they go, "Whoa, what do you mean?" Right? So I create a little doggy head tilt, and they say, "Oh, like, well, I guess." And I said, "Well, I was a young teen in Germany, and I didn't know German." And so that's a little bit of a problem, especially back then when I needed to be able to know German because very few people would say, "Oh, you're English. I can speak English to you." They just wouldn't do it. So what typically happened was I had to struggle a little bit. I had to look at the body language of people. I had to look at the context. I had to look at the environment. Eventually, I learned German, but I look at all opportunities as ways to decode complex environments. And my first one was decoded when I was a preteen teen in Germany. So I always now look at them like opportunities. It was a big shift for me. And so if I answer the question that way, then I've taken the formative experience learning German, going to learning how to live in Germany, and I've imported it into this moment. And now a person goes, "Whoa, now what do they get out of that?" She can overcome obstacles. She has a positive mindset. She can decode a situation, good strong verb to use in that environment, and you look at opportunities that way today. And so that's how we hit the ball.
Nice. Love it. Right out of the park.
Well, you had good content.
Yeah, no, and I think that's really a part of it, right? Is understanding what those key moments are and
Yeah.
reflecting on them, and then putting them in that context of those catchphrases, right?
Yeah.
Decoding,
Yeah. Yeah,
positivity,
decoding. Yeah.
resilience.
Yeah, and that's what people are looking for. So what you're thinking is, how does this moment connect to the thing? But first, the thing had to be meaningful. So I didn't
Hmm.
ask you how would you use the event. Instead, I said, okay, we're not going to do that. Well, tell me more about the event. So that excavation of the moment starts to get us to the meaning making, and then we can do something with it. But only until we find that it's meaningful to you. If you said, "Oh, it was no big deal. I don't want to talk about it. I had other things that happened that were better," we would go to the other moment. And
Right.
um, that's essentially what the book does in no uncertain terms, is really kind of get into that space of experience of having experiences in life itself. That's not science. But if you this book, this page, this map allows you to find dots in your life and then to unpack them. And at the end of each chapter, what I decided to do is I really didn't write the book to tell my story at all. And in fact, I don't. There are elements of me in it, of course, but it was really driven to help you tell your story, you, the interviewer, you, the new leader, you, the person in career transition. And because we know that tell me about yourself is probably the hardest question to answer.
Mm.
And if you celebrate Easter or any sort of religious holidays and you're getting together this spring, people will say, "Well, tell me what's been going on." Really, what they're saying is, "Tell me about yourself." So that's another opportunity, right, to practice your story.
Yeah.
So if you're looking at building your story, build it and then deploy it in low risk scenarios. Try it with relatives, friends, people who don't even know that you're actually practicing telling your peak story. That is to say, your story up until now, those three dots that mean a lot, that when in sequence unveils who you are, your unique value and worth. And everybody wants to be somebody, right? I mean, Martin Luther King Jr., Dr. King in 1967, August, Barrett Junior High School, I think it was Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, said, was speaking about your somebodyness. And he was talking
Hmm.
about having a life blueprint and how important it was at junior high to have a life blueprint. Still, we don't have a blueprint for telling our story, right? And we have good friends at the King Center. We love Bernice King, Chris Draft from the NFL, who's good friends with Bernice. And, I love their work because In social justice work, it's all about helping people honor their somebodyness. Well, everybody is a somebody, and
Mm-hmm.
everybody is different. So how are you making that distinguishing claim within this moment? And if you don't have a plan for it, you can't make it up. You know, I mean, typically people just they think they for a little bit they stutter stammer, not an overt stammer, and then they say, oh well, I really always like technology, and then they have an unclear start, a rough unfolding. Time passes and they go, oh, I hope I get it better next time. Hope can't be the strategy. Get the story straight. You can do it. We have 16-year-olds, 15-year-olds in dual enrollment classes at the university using the book, and we have 75-year-old men going through the book after they retire to try to figure out what they're going to do next. So it's a democratized method. Even though I sometimes use big words, it's the whole professor thing. It doesn't mean that the process is that difficult, right? I mean,
Right.
gotta show off the doctorate once in a while, right? I mean, what the
There you
heck?
go. Yeah. Flex those muscles.
Yeah,
Well, Dr.
I
Denniswell,
guess.
this was amazing. And I think so many great tips packed in there that I think this is going to be a double listen for a lot of people. But to take the
Cool.
opportunity when, and I'm speaking to many college students I know, when you're asked, how's your semester going? To take that opportunity and pick something that's happened in a class or an internship
That's right.
and talk about something meaningful, something that I can take away and remember and not be like
Yeah.
it's fine.
Yeah, and exactly. It's fine is not adequate. You're better than that. Grab a moment, really survey it. Use the book to help you. We have podcasts also that are interviews about the book. So if you want to
Awesome.
cheat the book, which I don't think you should do, but if you want to, go for it. They're up there for a reason, and some of them are really long. Some of them an hour and a half. Some of
Awesome.
them are 45 minutes, and some of them, the one I did for the University of Chicago, is 30 minutes. And I actually
Fantastic.
take a live case and I redo the person's story in the case. So I love the work that you're doing. I just want to say thanks so much for inviting
Thank you.
me, and glad to share my work with you and everyone else who needs to story like they mean it to get the job that they want.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.